Hey, welcome to this video tutorial on discovery-driven planning for your BYU Idaho strategy course. I'm Bill Crawford and I'm excited to share this great concept with you. I want to start by telling you a story. When I was a young business manager in about 2007, 2008, I was in charge of putting together the business proposal for a brand new product for my company. It was exciting for me because this was the first time I was going to be able to write a business plan, pitch the idea for financing to my company, and then if I got the money, be able to lead a team to develop a brand new product. It was awesome, and I was so excited. And then the day before the business presentation, the proposal to pitch to the committee that would approve this project and the financing that went with it, I had a friend of mine come to me. He was a vice president in the company, and he said, whatever you do and you go in there, you're going to give them some numbers. And they're not going to like those numbers. They're going to want bigger numbers. So you just listen carefully, and when they say that number is not big enough, you ask them, well, how big do you think it should be? How many do you think we should sell? And then you're going to go back and you're going to do some market research, and miraculously, when you come back a month later, your numbers are going to be exactly what they want, and they're going to approve it. This is a typical, very typical business planning approach in companies, and it actually leads to a lot of problems, failed products, sad people, and disappointment. Because as any rational person knows, you really can't predict what you're going to sell before you sell it. You really don't know how much profit you're going to make before you build the product. And yet that leaves us with a real problem, because why would anybody invest in your opportunity if they didn't believe that they could make a good profit and a good return on that investment? So we've got this problem. On the one hand, we try to predict the future, and we have to, in some cases, stretch our own imaginations, and that can lead to failure. And on the other hand, we have uncertainty to deal with. Well, this is where this new exciting concept called discovery-driven planning comes in. When I say it's new, it's kind of old, actually. It was come up with in the 90s, but we're going to introduce it to you today as though it was the first time. Discovery-driven planning is a process or a method that we can use that will help us to identify the risks in the business, understand how much profit we need to make, even if we don't know how much we're going to make, and then, most importantly, identify the assumptions, those critical assumptions that have to be tested before we put massive amounts of money, time, and effort into a project that might be doomed to fail. So it's a way for us to discover those parts of the business and our assumptions that are right and good and we should keep going with, and those parts that we need to refine, update, and change so that we can increase our chances for success. When should we use discovery-driven planning? Discovery-driven planning is really great when you're doing a startup or a new product, especially in a disruptive circumstance. Think for a second about that scenario I gave you before. If you had lots and lots of resources, lots of market knowledge, and you had predictable customers and predictable suppliers, and the competition was fairly well known, and lots of data about your industry and market, you could probably get away with making some predictions based on that data that would be fairly good, and it might lead to success. But when you're in a true startup, or when you're doing a disruptive opportunity, then discovery-driven planning is especially useful. The first step in discovery-driven planning is to begin with the end in mind. And what that means is to build what we're going to call a reverse income statement. Rather than beginning our income statement with revenues and then cost of goods sold, gross margin, etc., we're going to start with how much profit do we need to earn in order to make it worth our time and effort for this new venture. Now, if you think about it for a second, that's important because we don't know how much profit we will earn. We'll only know how much we need to earn in order for it to be worth our time and effort. After we build the reverse income statement, we need to identify all of the assumptions, both explicit and implicit, that went into coming up with those numbers. So if we can identify the assumptions, then we can prioritize those assumptions, and after prioritizing, come up with a list of tests that will allow us to know, did we get these assumptions right or are they wrong, and we need to change something in our plan. Ultimately, then, we will test those assumptions, and anything that comes out false or wrong or fails the assumption, we'll go back, we'll change the numbers, and then we've got to start over and go back down that list to make sure that with our new assumptions, the numbers still make sense for us. That is basically how you do discovery-driven planning. What do you say we go into a real-world but kind of made-up example? Let's say that you have this idea for a hot new technology company to serve small businesses. In the current state of the world, in a lot of small businesses, they have to do their financial accounting software, their point-of-sale software, their HR software, and their operations management software are all separate, independent, little modular software solutions. None of them work well together, and none of them is particularly great at what they do. Let's say that you believe there's an opportunity to make an interdependent solution that puts all of those not good enough pieces together into something that works seamlessly and works extremely well for your customers so that they can solve all of those headaches and all the integration problems with their software in one simple, affordable solution. That sounds exciting to you, and you want to see, is this going to be a good idea for me to be able to raise some money and get investors to go for it? So with that in mind, let's see how discovery-driven planning could be used to make this opportunity a reality for you. Let's start with the reverse income statement. We need to begin with how much profit do we need to earn to make this worth our while. Now, that's a daunting task if you think about it, but let's make it as simple as we can. So in order to know how much profit we need to understand what will our investors demand in return for the money they're going to give us. This is called the hurdle rate, or return on investment. It's a pretty simple term, and I hope you've heard it in your finance class before. If you haven't, probably a good time to go brush back up on that stuff. But let's just say that you've assumed that you need $25 million to get your product developed, launched, and to the market where it's making money for you. All right, great. Well, in order to get that $25 million, your investors are going to demand something. And typically on a high-risk venture or a new venture like this, they might even expect something as high as 25% annually. So the first step is really just to say, if you need $25 million, then the annual profit is going to be 25% of that $25 million. And in this particular case, the investment of $25 million times the hurdle rate or return on investment of 25% will give you $6,250,000 annually. That's the required profit you need to make this venture worth your while and that of your investors. Let me just make a little side note here. The way that I describe that is really oversimplified, but it's good for us to understand how ROI works. If you want to go deeper or have a more in-depth knowledge of how you would go about doing this, for sure, go back to your finance course or take some more advanced finance courses. But for our purposes today, this $6,250,000 in annual profit is perfect. So now that we've got our profit target figured out, we need to come up with some understanding of our cost structure and what revenues will we need to generate in order to produce that profit. And if we had an existing company, we were already up and running, and there were products like the one we're developing, we could use the cost structure for the company as an estimate for how much our cost structure is going to be for this new product. If the product is completely different from the existing company's cost structure, of course we can't use that. Since this is a software company and we don't have an existing company, I just picked a software company that everybody knows and loves, Microsoft. Microsoft makes all kinds of great products that change people's lives. And they've been around for a long time. So they have a mature company with a well-understood cost structure. Now, I'm not saying that ours is going to be the same as theirs, but it's a starting point. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually invite you to go to Microsoft's website, go to the 2022 annual report, and open that up And then what we want you to do is find the income statement, and then we're going to do a fun activity right after that.